Well, hello, and welcome to Session 3. As our Health Master team and myself work behind the scenes to provide telephone and email support for your group and other groups, I just want to say on behalf of our team, thank you for practicing self-care towards yourself. Yeah, that's what it is, self-care. When we pause in the busyness of our day-to-day life and invest in one of our most important assets, our psychology, the rewards are significant. We just think about all the things we value most. Being happy, have good relationships, succeeding at our work, and yet what determines us having all of those things is found in the practice of self-care towards creating a healthy psychology. In the 25 years that I've been working with people, I can honestly say that the most exciting part about it is watching people make progress. So thank you for letting me be part of your journey. And any of you that need support, please make sure that you contact us through your dashboard. Okay, let's move in today's session by reviewing what we've done in Session 1 and Session 2, and then how in Session 3 we'll build on that foundation of what we did in Session 1 and 2. In Session 1, we talked about how our psychological functions are an amazing part of us and they make up who we are. They also determine the success that we will have in our work, our relationships, and our overall quality of life. We then talked about how our psychological functions move back and forth from being in a regulated or an escalated state. Being escalated often would be considered unpleasant and a stressful place. Becoming escalated is okay and very normal as long as we don't move into this state too often or stay in it for too long or find that we're unable to bring ourselves back to a regulated state. And then we closed by talking about how many people view their psychological functions like the color of their eyes. It's something they cannot change. They're just born with it. However, the frontiers of brain science tell us that our brains are neuroplastic, which means they can change. Each of us are capable of making positive changes to our psychological functions, which means that we create awareness and learn how to regulate ourselves when we become escalated. In Session 2, we learned how to become aware of our psychological functions and how to bring ourselves from an escalated state back to a regulated state using our regulation tools. We then looked into the lives of Sue, Bill, and John as they began their journey in working to improve their psychological functions. Then we shifted and introduced engagement and how engagement works to create healthy connections between people, making us less susceptible to becoming escalated, and how actually being disconnected to people makes us highly susceptible to that escalation. Now, in today's Session 3, I want to talk about what causes us and makes us susceptible to becoming escalated, which involves learning about basic emotional needs that we have and what happens when they're unmet or met or disregarded altogether. We will also talk about deep intrinsic longings for emotional connection with others and how this profound connection is experienced when these emotions are expressed and understood by others and validated. You see, when this occurs and when we experience this deep sense of feeling cared for and understood and accepted, we actually are connected. Having these needs met are basic to our sense of emotional safety. And when they're not, our core survival responses of flight, fight, or freeze become activated. If these needs are disregarded, as in a case if we feel criticized or insulted or put down or rejected by others, our survival instincts become highly activated and we can rapidly move into that state of fight, flight, or freeze. So as you read through this review in your workbook, I just want to say that for those of you who are not able to create awareness when in an escalated state, or you're not even able to regulate yourselves, please don't hesitate to call one of our counselors who are available to take your call, or perhaps you have access through counselors through your insurance. And as I said earlier, it's perfectly normal for most people to receive support when they're first learning this. I know I had to receive support when I was first learning this. So please don't hesitate to reach out. As we work together today, let's remember the 3 guidelines which are designed to ensure that you receive maximum benefit from your experience. They include overcoming the stigma of talking about your mental health, practice honesty without oversharing, in other words, to ensure that what you share is appropriate. The third one is engage others, which means to do your best to create a connection by participating in the group engagement exercises. And of course, we want to go over confidentiality, which means everything said in this group stays in the group. All right, last week we talked about engagement, which is a key factor in reducing our susceptibility towards becoming escalated. And it also helps you to use the regulation tools more successfully to bring ourselves back from an escalated state to a regulated state. Lack of engagement is also the #1 cause of poor mental health. Engagement, in essence, is being defined as having a sense of connection with one or more persons. The interpersonal dynamics when this connection happens is a strong sense of acceptance, empathy, and trust. Engagement is also experienced in kindness and patience, and when gentleness are expressed between people. It's intrinsic within each one of us to desire to be engaged with other people. Right now, you probably have some level of engagement with people in your life or people in this group. But due to past or current relationship fractures that we've all experienced in life, some of us find it more difficult to create high levels of engagement with other people, being that there might be a conscious or unconscious fear of getting hurt again. So we tend to stand back and avoid others and then avoid engagement with others. The challenge we face when we stand back and avoid engagement is that some of our deepest emotional needs are not being met, which means we begin to form poor mental health. The more we understand about the human brain, and the more we learn how critical it is for us to be engaged for each of us. In last week's session, we did an exercise by putting the mask on to demonstrate the effect of what it feels like to experience the emotions of being disengaged. Another example of this that I came across recently is a quote by the World Health Organization, which says this: "If a prisoner is put into solitary confinement for more than 15 days, it's considered torture," indicating the deep intrinsic longing that we have as humans to engage with others. This, of course, is shown through the explosion of the porn industry. Although these connections are superficial, the logic here shows the deep human longing for humans to be engaged. So if they can't do it in a healthy way, they'll take what they can. So as we move through each of our sessions, our goal is to increase the level of engagement that we have with each other in this group, and of course with the people that you know outside this group. So at this time, I want to do an exercise called laughter therapy, which will bring value to each of you. So, host, why don't you go ahead and stop the video, prepare the room by moving the chairs around, and when everyone is ready, press play and follow Vic as he leads a Health Master group just like yours in this exercise. Now, as he gives instructions to his group, please follow along with your group. Now, for those of you who are not quite sure about this exercise, I very much appreciate you trusting the process and playing hard as you participate.
Okay, everyone's ready to go. We got the room prepared, the chairs are out, everyone's standing there. Is everyone ready to go?
Yes.
Good. So the first type of laughter we're going to do is motorboat laughter. So I'm going to do it first, demonstrate it, then you're going to do it next. So watch me first, and then you're going to do it. Okay? That's a warm-up. Okay? So let's do that for about 20 seconds. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. That was good energy. You guys feel it? So I'm going to demonstrate gut laughter. So gut laughter is a little bit different than motorboat laughter. Gut laughter is from the gut. Okay? So, ready? So that's gut laughter. Okay? So force your physical body, your mouth, to do gut laughter. Okay, on 1, 2, 3 gut laughter, we're going to walk around the room. So when you go to another person, about 5 seconds. So you're going to have a chance to go to about 3 people to do gut laughter. Okay, okay, let's begin. Excellent, excellent. Okay, great work, man. You guys are a good group. Okay, the third type of laughter, most important type of laughter, all types, is deep laughter. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate that. So that's just, remember, motorboat was sort of like low, gut laughter is medium, deep laughter is high. So it's really, this is where you really got to play hard, because right now what's happening in your brain is you've stimulated a lot of chemicals, and this next one is just going to take you right over the top, okay? And it's going to create that great high feeling. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to demonstrate it, and then when I give you guys the key to go and do it with each other, you're going to go up to another person, and you're going to put your right hand on their shoulder. Just touch their shoulder, nowhere else. You can touch them, just their shoulder. And one person has to have their hand on someone's shoulder, and you'll put your hand on my shoulder, so like that. This is the position. And again, about 5 seconds. So you have a chance to do this with 3 people. And when you're doing this, make eye contact, okay? So a little bit more complex, but the benefit is very high. So let's get ready for a demonstration of deep laughter. Okay, pretty simple, right? When's the last time you laughed like that before? Okay, so remember, 3 people you're going to go up to. Let's do a demonstration. Put your hand on their shoulder and deep gut laughter. Okay. Okay, let's begin. Okay, good. We're done.
Awesome.
Well, alrighty then. How was that for you? I do appreciate you doing the exercise. And I want to ask if there are a few people who are willing to share what their experience was during that laughter therapy. Please keep your sharing to less than 2 minutes. Have you ever reacted to a situation in a manner you later regretted? Perhaps you said or did some things in the heat of a stressful, escalated moment that you wished you could now take back or simply undo. I know that I have. And it's an all too common story. Someone says or does something that triggers intense emotion in us, and without even aware, we can move from being regulated to fully blown escalation very quickly. In that state, intense emotions can drive our reactions in ways that we later regret. Anyone who has struggled to manage anger or being reactive or tried to change these habitual patterns can attest to the fact that it's not an easy process. In previous lessons, we have briefly touched on emotional escalation. And in this lesson, I would like to spend a bit more time going over the science behind the escalation process and explaining what we can do to manage it better. You know, there are so many factors that can trigger us into an emotionally escalated state or bring us back into an emotionally regulated state. And most of them are closely connected to what is happening in that moment in relation to our basic emotional needs. To begin with, I'd like to talk about these basic emotional needs and what happens when they're met, unmet, or disregarded altogether. As humans, we have a deep intrinsic longing for emotional connection with others. And this connection is experienced when our feelings are listened to, acknowledged, and validated. When this occurs, we experience a profound sense of feeling cared for, understood, and accepted. And having these needs met are basic to our sense of emotional safety and survival. And when they're not met or disregarded, as in the case when we feel criticized or insulted or put down, not heard, ignored, rejected, our core survival responses of fight, flight, or freeze become activated. You know, if we respond with fight, we may end up lashing out verbally through insults or criticism, or even becoming physically aggressive. If we respond with flight, we might rapidly leave a situation in a cold, bitter state, or respond with the silent treatment. If we respond with freeze, we might simply shut down emotionally and move into a state of feeling emotionally numb. Have you ever wondered why changing our reactions are so difficult? Remember that our brains are wired for survival, and the same instinctive responses that drive our physical survival reactions, the fight, flight, or freeze, are also at play when we experience an emotional threat. An emotional threat can be anything that causes us to feel hurt or fearful or angry or disconnected from others. Some examples might be feeling misunderstood, invalidated, not cared for, disrespected. That's a huge one. We might also feel this way by having something or someone get in the way of us achieving a goal or a strong desire, something that's very important to us. An emotional threat can also be felt if something in the present moment reminds us in any way of a past traumatic or painful life situation. Any of these emotional threats can drive us into a state where we become quickly overwhelmed and rapidly enter into a state of fight, flight, or freeze. Let's talk about what is happening in our brain during these moments and why it can be difficult to rein in our own reactions. To start with, it can be helpful to understand that there are different parts to our brain, and each plays a different role in our overall functioning. For example, in the middle or lower part of our brain, we have the emotional and survival centers. These parts help us to react instinctively to danger or to any kind of perceived threat in the moment, either physical or emotional. The upper or frontal part of our brain is largely responsible for complex analytical thought. This is the part that helps us analyze situations, making conscious decisions and solving life's problems. It also helps rein in our impulses and stops us from reacting impulsively in the heat of the moment, much like the brakes in a car can help us to avoid crashing into things. It's important to be aware that our brain is wired to keep us safe, both physically and emotionally. In order to do so, the emotional and survival parts of our brain are wired to override the thinking, logical parts of our brain during moments of threat. This happens regardless of whether the threat is physical or emotional. Our brain is wired to default quickly into survival responses and instinctive reactions to threat faster than we can process conscious thought. We're designed in a way so that in a dangerous situation, we're going to jump out of the way, move to flee, or fight from a very instinctual place without being slowed down by analyzing the situation. For example, if you were walking through the park and someone yelled, "Look out!" and as you glanced up to see a baseball hurtling towards you, your survival instinct would kick in and you would move in an attempt to dodge the ball to avoid being hit. This would happen without any analytical work at all. In a sense, the logical thinking part of our brain is overridden during these moments, while the survival reactive part of our brain takes over. So what does all this mean for us? And how does this apply to our behavior when we become escalated? Essentially, the same survival responses that help us to avoid danger are at play at any time we become emotionally escalated, predisposing us to react before we think. This is why we say and do things in the moment that we later regret, once we have a chance to calm down and think about things. Unfortunately, at this point, our reactions may have caused damage to our relationships. So, what's the solution? As we've already talked about in session 2, the solution really lies in recognizing when you're starting to become escalated and bringing awareness to that state. Knowing when you're just starting to become escalated can help you make choices early on to avoid entering into those states of fight, flight, or freeze, and keep you from reacting in ways that you might otherwise regret. One rule of thumb might be to consider this: simply refrain from engaging further in a situation when you're becoming aware that you're in an escalated state, knowing that the risk that your survival instincts may contribute to your behavior in a way that is not helpful and that can actually make things worse. So when you feel escalation coming on, learning how to put a difficult situation on hold by taking a time out and regulating yourself would be a smart move. And once regulated, you can return back to the situation, being you have regained the rational, logical, and thinking capabilities in your brain. Everyone may have a different survival response. I would like to spend a couple of minutes just checking out with each of you what your default survival strategy is. Some people engage in fight response, some may respond with a flight mode, and then there are some who may move into freeze mode. I want each person to take no more than 15 seconds to share. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to become more easily escalated than others? It's like why two people can walk into a room and be exposed to the exact same difficult situation, yet one of them gets shifted into a fully escalated state, while the other person is able to maintain a regulated state more easily. For many of us, the answer lies with what we have experienced in our past, including events in our childhood. Deep in the center of our brain, we have an emotional center that is closely linked to survival parts of our brain and acts as a storehouse for all of our life experiences, including emotional experiences. Many of these experiences are stored unconsciously in what we call implicit memory, meaning we cannot consciously recall them, but they remain there and continue to influence our emotional states without conscious awareness. When we experience day-to-day life, all information that is fed through our brain moves in part through our emotional center first, before it hits the logical thinking parts of our brain. Like an internet search engine that returns to a search in a millisecond, the emotional center of our brain looks for a link between the present and the past. But the match is rarely perfect. It only requires that there be some association between the past and the present, which could be a sight, a smell, a touch, a sound, or a feeling. Any connection at all to a previous experience can cause emotions in this moment and cause us to feel escalated. We call this being triggered. This searching is always happening in our day-to-day life and occurs much faster than our conscious thinking and is thus completely outside of our awareness. For those who have experienced a lot of negative events in their lives, they simply have more triggers and can be more prone to reacting. Now, let's check in with Bill, Sue, and John, who are going through the Health Masters at the same pace that you guys are. I've asked them to talk about what makes them susceptible to becoming escalated. I also want to thank them for opening up their lives to us by being vulnerable and sharing their story in order for us to learn from real first-hand experiences. Often understanding things in other people's lives is sometimes easier than understanding our own.
For a while now, I have been coming into an awareness that I have always had a low self-esteem, which seems to trigger me when any type of relationship fracture occurs in my life, whether at work, at home, or with my siblings. Having harmony in my relationships is so important to me, and yet when a fracture occurs, I fall into an escalated state, and often anxiety goes with it. I've been doing the personal journaling in my e-learning platform and talking to the Health Master Counselor. It's been good to learn that when any type of relationship fracture occurs, I know I'm susceptible to becoming escalated. And sometimes, not always, I'm able to diffuse becoming escalated. It's not as difficult as I thought. So I have a lot of work to do to change my thought and emotional process and how I react so easily when people hurt me instead of staying engaged with them and setting proper boundaries. I guess my next step is to stay engaged in this process. My tendency when I start doing good work on myself is to back off and not finish it.
I can remember my mother always worried and shifting from a regulated state into an escalated state when things would go wrong. And I would sit there and get worried myself as I watched her shift into this stressful, escalated state. And of course, at this point, she would become less rational and less logical and sometimes even unreasonable. So here I am now doing life as a mother and a wife. And when things go wrong, I react into an escalated state just like my mother did. It's kind of automatic. It's like an autopilot mode I seem to fall in. It's like she provided this perfect template for me to repeat her patterns. So when Kim challenged me to start becoming aware of what makes me so susceptible to becoming escalated, I knew the answer to this question right away because I learned it in a marriage counseling session a few years back. But to be honest, it was really too painful to deal with at that time. And so now, since it seems like I'm revisiting this in my life again, I'm really wanting to learn how to not be reactionary when things happen to me that hurt me or thwart my plans. I definitely feel more courage and strength to face this, and I'm excited to find out the improvements that it will bring to my life.
When I came to the part where you asked me to consider what makes me susceptible to becoming escalated, it was hard for me to connect the dots. I went home that night and talked to my wife about it, and I was surprised about how much insight she had into my life. It was like my blind spots were not blind to her. So here's what she said. Most of my stresses in life are related somehow to my performance. It's when she empathetically pointed this out in my sister and 2 brothers that allowed me to see it more clearly in them. Each of us children were validated based on our ability to get our jobs done. If we didn't do our work, we would get in trouble. If we did our work, we got validated. If we did it well, we got super validated and rewarded. So as I think of this, it makes me sad that what validated me as a child has extended right into my adult life. At first, I was angry at my parents, but then I quickly realized that they were raised that way too. So they did their best. So last week, I shared why I was escalated, and it always seems to be around me not being able to get my work done or not achieving a certain target, which is the worst thing I can experience. Even if the consequences are not terrible, there's something in me that fears not being able to achieve my goals, which is a definite trigger for me. So I want to keep learning. And so far, I am amazed that I haven't backed away from this challenge. So I think I'm going to go all the way.
Okay, I'd like to ask if there's any people in the group who would like to elaborate a bit more on how they become triggered into escalation. I'd like to hear from 3 or 4 people. At this time, I would like each of you to consider working a bit deeper with me on this topic by going into your workbook and answering the questions that are there. Okay, thanks for doing that. I'd like to ask the host to break up the group into small groups and discuss with each other the answers that you have in your book. Well, let's review what we learned today. We started by doing the engagement exercise, the laughter therapy, with the goal of increasing the level of engagement that we experience in relationships. We then learned what makes each of us vulnerable to becoming escalated. We discovered that if our deep emotional needs are not met and we feel disrespected, we become vulnerable to escalation. We also looked at how our adverse childhood experiences create a greater challenge in us as adults to more easily becoming escalated. Yet we also discussed that how we can overcome this negative experience. Then we looked at the life of Bill, Sue, and John as they share their experience. Well, we have come to the end of our time today. Thank you so much for being with me. Please make sure you carry out the e-learning exercise. Each of them are designed to stimulate positive changes in your life. Remember, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us. I'd love for you to have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session.